Luciana always dreamed of being a doctor. Since she was a child, she was fascinated by the idea of helping people and making a difference in their lives. With great effort, she became a respected surgeon at one of the most renowned hospitals in the city. Delicate and attentive, she noticed details that others would not notice, and her confident touch conveyed confidence to her patients. For Luciana, medicine was not just a profession, it was her life's mission. However, her mother, Dona Estela, never quite understood her choice. "My daughter, why open up bodies and deal with blood? Wouldn't a more peaceful career be better?" she would ask, worried. Luciana, patient, would smile and answer, "Mom, I chose medicine because I want to change lives. I'm not looking for easy work." Over time, her dedication drew attention at the hospital. The most complex surgeries were often assigned to her, and it was common for Luciana to be called in for last-minute shifts. Even at difficult times, she never complained. Dona Estela, insisting that she should think about starting a family, would occasionally question her, "Time flies, my daughter." But Luciana remained firm. She had her own plans. One night, after a long day of work, Luciana finally left the hospital. She had undergone 2 major surgeries that morning, and then spent hours in emergency surgery after a car accident. She was exhausted and could hardly wait to get home, take off her shoes, and sink into a hot bath. Walking through the park next to the hospital, enveloped in the silence of the cold night, she felt the weight of exhaustion. But suddenly, a groan cut through the silence. Luciana stopped, trying to understand where the sound was coming from. Curious and restless, she turned on the flashlight on her cell phone and followed the sound to a nearby bush. When she shined the light on the spot, she saw a man lying on the ground, groaning in pain. With dirty and worn clothes, he seemed to be on the fringes of society, a homeless person. Luciana hesitated and thought about retreating, but his groan awakened her medical instincts. Approaching him, she asked gently, "Sir, is everything okay? Do you need help?" The man only groaned, holding his stomach. Luciana didn't think twice. "I'm a doctor, I'll help you," she said calmly as she examined him. Her calm voice and professional touch seemed to give the man some hope. When she touched the man's abdomen, Luciana felt something wrong. He needed urgent surgery. Wasting no time, she picked up the phone and called the hospital's emergency department, requesting an ambulance to go to the park immediately. On the other end of the line, the receptionist hesitated. "Doctor, shouldn't he be sent to a public hospital? Our hospital? Well, it doesn't treat people in this condition." Luciana sighed, already aware of the prejudice present there, but kept her tone firm. "He needs help now. There's no time for bureaucracy. Please send an ambulance." The receptionist reluctantly gave in, and a few minutes later, the paramedics arrived with the stretcher. The staff looked at each other, surprised that they were transporting a homeless man to such a prestigious hospital. One of the paramedics asked her quietly, "Dr. Luciana, are you sure about this? It's risky. He's homeless." She, remaining calm, replied, "First of all, he's a human being. Place him on the stretcher carefully and we'll take him." The scene was unusual. Nurses and doctors in the emergency room looked on in astonishment as Luciana prepared the man for surgery, determined to save his life. Upon arriving at the emergency room, Luciana noticed the discomfort on her colleagues' faces. Nurses whispered, while some staff looked away, surprised by the man's presence. Dr. Eduardo, the doctor on duty, shook his head at the situation and, crossing his arms, declared, "I'm not going to operate on this homeless man. There's no point in risking the hospital because of him." Luciana remained calm, but her determination left no room for argument. "Okay, Dr. Eduardo, I'll do the surgery myself." With a firm smile, she looked at the nurses and ordered, "Let's get ready, girls. You need this surgery, and I'll take responsibility." Dr. Eduardo protested once more, this time in a more aggressive tone. "Luciana, do you know where you are? This is an elite hospital. We treat influential people, people of class. This man is dirty. He must be full of infections." Luciana interrupted him coldly. "A thorough cleaning will solve the problem in the room. And as for human dignity, I believe it applies to everyone." Without waiting for an answer, she began to prepare the patient. With a look of resignation, The nurses followed Luciana, amazed at her courage and commitment. Dr. Eduardo left the room, grumbling, but she was determined to save that life, even if she had to face the consequences later. The surgery was complex, but Luciana remained focused, each movement demonstrating the experience and confidence she had acquired over the years. The nurses who were with her looked at her with respect, aware that they were witnessing a rare act of compassion. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Ricardo, an older, more traditional man, watched silently, admiring her attitude. At the end, he broke the silence. "You made the right choice, Luciana. If he had been taken to another hospital, he probably wouldn't have survived." Luciana took a deep breath, feeling relief mixed with fatigue. "It was the only option, Dr. Ricardo. I couldn't leave him without help." But the anesthesiologist warned her, "Be prepared to face Dr. Ronaldo, the boss. He won't see this the same way we do." She shrugged, confident that she had done the right thing. When she got home that night, already in the early hours of the morning, Luciana barely had the strength to take off her lab coat and throw herself on the bed. But she didn't have much time to rest. The next morning, she was awakened by a phone call. It was Dr. Reynaldo himself, furious. He started yelling bluntly, "Luciana, what were you thinking? You brought a homeless person to our hospital, putting the health of others at risk." Trying to remain calm, she answered firmly, "Dr. Reynaldo, he would have died without this surgery. He is a human being." But he didn't want to hear it. "You are fired, and forget about any labor rights. The damage you caused will cover the costs." Luciana hung up the phone, shaking as tears flowed silently. She knew she had done the right thing, but she would pay a high price for it. Luciana was stunned by the sudden dismissal. She sat by the window, watching the city still silent that morning. Tears flowed, but she tried to keep her head up. Dona Estela, her mother, approached her when she saw her daughter's worried expression. "What happened, my daughter?" she asked softly. Luciana took a deep breath and explained everything: the surgery, the patient, and how Dr. Reynaldo had fired her without hesitation. Dona Estela, with a sigh of indignation, hugged her daughter. "We live in difficult times, Luciana. This world seems increasingly blind to the value of human life," she said, trying to calm her daughter. "You did the right thing. God sees everything, my dear. You can be sure that this will come back to you in ways you can't even imagine." Even though her mother's words brought comfort, Luciana couldn't help but worry. "But now I'm unemployed, Mom. Dr. Reynaldo will surely spread this to other hospitals and I'll end up on the blacklist. Who will want to hire me after that?" Dona Estela held her daughter's hands, offering her a hopeful smile. "You'll find a way, even if it's in another role. Maybe it'll be an opportunity for something new, my daughter." But while this was happening at the hospital, Dr. Reynaldo was already calling directors of other hospitals, trying to make sure that Luciana would be barred from any new opportunities. He had no idea that soon, an unexpected turn of events would turn everything upside down. At the hospital, Dr. Reynaldo was settling into his office, relieved to think that the crisis with the homeless man was resolved. However, minutes later, one of his assistants rushed in. "Dr. Reynaldo, we have a surprise inspection from the Ministry of Health coming up. I just got a call from a friend of mine who works at the ministry." He turned pale. "Inspection? Now." He quickly picked up the phone and called the nursing staff. "Have you taken the homeless man out of the hospital yet?" he asked irritably. "The ambulance from the public hospital hasn't arrived yet, doctor," they replied on the other end. Dr. Reynaldo exploded. "Then take him out right now. Leave him on the other side of the park, where you can get him without causing trouble here." The nurses, although reluctant, obeyed. They covered the man with a blanket and pushed him out of the hospital on a stretcher, trying to ignore the conscience that was bothering them. When they took him outside, the vans from the Ministry of Health were already arriving at the hospital entrance. Inside the building, Dr. Reynaldo breathed a sigh of relief, believing that the problem was far away. But outside, one of the inspectors noticed the patient on the stretcher, and as he approached, his face remained still. He recognized that face. "Dad!" exclaimed Nathaniel, one of the inspectors, astonished. The nurses stood paralyzed, not knowing how to react. And at that moment, Dr. Ronaldo had no idea that his decision would end up revealing something that would change everything. Nathaniel could not believe what he saw. The dirty and weakened man lying on the stretcher was his father, whom he had been looking for years. "Dad, is that you?" He approached quickly, his eyes fixed on the man's thin, bearded face. The nurses, confused and shocked, exchanged glances, not knowing what to say. The man, who had previously been moaning in pain, looked at Nathaniel with lost eyes, as if she was trying to recognize her own son. Another inspector, a colleague of Nathaniel, approached and was also astonished. "Is this Mr. Fabio, the businessman who disappeared 2 years ago?" she asked, incredulous. Nathaniel nodded, still processing what she had just discovered. "Yes, it's him. My father. We thought he was dead." The nurses, seeing the commotion, knew that the truth would soon come out. It was then that one of them, hesitantly, spoke softly. "We need to tell the truth, Nathaniel. The one who saved your father was Dr. Luciana, and she was fired for it." Nathaniel, still in shock, turned to the nurse. "What do you mean, fired?" And so, the whole story came out. How Luciana defied Dr. Reynaldo's orders and performed the surgery that saved her father's life, even knowing that it could cost her career. Furious, Nathaniel entered the hospital and went straight to Dr. Reynaldo's office. Without knocking, he opened the door abruptly. "Did you know that the man you tried to throw out was my father?" he said, his voice thick with rage. Dr. Reynaldo was speechless, pale, trying to compose himself. Nathaniel continued, "And you fired the only person who saved him." Dr. Reynaldo, his face ashen, tried to maintain his composure. "Nathaniel, you have to understand. This decision was made to protect the image of the hospital. We need to maintain a high standard for our patients," he stammered without much conviction. But Nathaniel interrupted him, approaching with an intense, fixed gaze. "Protection? At what cost, Reynaldo? You were willing to abandon a human being, my father, to his fate, all to preserve your reputation." Trying to regain control of the situation, Dr. Reynaldo looked away. "If I had known he was your father, I would have acted differently," he justified himself, but the excuse sounded hollow. Nathaniel, now with a firm and determined voice, declared, "Go to Dr. Luciana's house, apologize, and convince her to come back. She saved my father's life and deserves more respect than that." With no way out, Dr. Reynaldo nodded, leaving the office with a dejected look. He arrived at Luciana's apartment door, and upon seeing him, she was surprised and suspicious. "Dr. Reynaldo, did you come to personally deliver the dismissal papers to me?" she asked sarcastically. "Luciana," he began in an embarrassed tone, "I made a mistake. Your patient was the father of one of the inspectors from the Ministry of Health. We need you back at the hospital." Luciana hesitated, reflecting on her wounded pride and the sacrifice she had made to save that man. After a few moments of silence, she finally answered, "I agree to come back, but not to please the hospital, but because I love what I do. I hope this will be a learning experience." Luciana returned to the hospital accompanied by Dr. Reynaldo, where Nathaniel was anxiously waiting for her. When he saw her, his face lit up with relief and gratitude. He approached her, extending his hand with a sincere smile. "Dr. Luciana, I don't even know how to thank you. What you did for my father saved our family from an even greater tragedy." Luciana, surprised by the warm welcome, shook Nathaniel's hand, feeling finally recognized for her act. "I just did what any doctor should do," she answered modestly, but her eyes showed the satisfaction of knowing that her courage had been appreciated. Nathaniel moved, looked at his father, who was still recovering, but was slowly beginning to regain his memory. "We've been looking for him for 2 years, Nathaniel said, his voice breaking. "I've lost hope of finding him alive." Reynaldo, embarrassed, remained silent as Luciana approached the patient's bed. "Mr. Fabio, you are safe now. Your recovery will be complete, and we will do everything we can to help you recover." In the following weeks, the relationship between Nathaniel and Luciana grew stronger, as he spent more time at the hospital to be with his father. During one of his visits, he overheard some nurses talking about how Dr. Rinaldo had tried to hide his father's presence, and how Luciana had defied orders to save his life. Nathaniel felt he had to do something. He sought out Dr. Rinaldo and confronted him again. "Make sure Luciana gets the recognition and respect she deserves. This hospital only exists because doctors like her are willing to act with courage." Dr. Rinaldo, still impacted by the confrontation with Nathaniel, understood that there was no longer any way to ignore Luciana's value. He called a meeting at the hospital and, in front of the entire staff, made a point of recognizing the doctor's heroic act. "Dr. Luciana has shown us the true spirit of medicine, placing human life above any judgment or convenience," she said in a humble tone. Luciana's face flushed slightly, but her expression was one of determination. She knew that her work was finally being honored. After the meeting, Nathaniel approached her, thanking her once again. "My family will never be able to repay you for what you did for us," she said, her eyes shining with gratitude. "But if you need anything, I'm here." Luciana smiled, feeling more motivated than ever to continue her mission to save lives, no matter the obstacles. Meanwhile, the investigation into Mr. Fabio's past progressed. With Nathaniel's support, the authorities discovered that the accident that had led to his father's disappearance was no accident. When they searched the files, they realized that Paolo, Fabio's stepson, had ulterior motives. Nathaniel followed every step of the investigation, determined to obtain justice. Finally, an arrest warrant was issued for Paolo, and he was detained for his attempt to eliminate his stepfather and take control of the family business. During the trial, Nathaniel remembered Luciana's words about justice and dignity. And so, her father, Mr. Fabio, now with his memory fully recovered, decided to entrust the management of his business to Nathaniel, maintaining a simple and quiet life with his son. Months passed, and the hospital resumed its routine, now with a more welcoming and respectful environment, especially regarding Luciana's work. Her courage had inspired many, and even Dr. Rinaldo, previously so strict and focused on appearances, had begun to treat everyone with more humanity. One day, Luciana was surprised by an unexpected visitor. It was Mr. Fabio himself, now well recovered, accompanied by Nathaniel. He had a big smile and a bouquet of flowers. "Dr. Luciana," he said, his voice emotional, "I cannot express in words what you have done for me and my family. Without you, I would not be here today." Luciana smiled, touched, and accepted the flowers with gratitude. "I am happy to see that you are well, Mr. Fabio. And knowing that my choice brought something good is already the greatest reward I could receive," she replied sincerely. Nathaniel, next to his father, looked at Luciana with admiration. During the months of visits and conversations at the hospital, he had gotten to know her more deeply, seeing beyond the committed doctor. He had seen the strong and honest woman that she was. Mr. Fabio could not contain himself and extended an invitation. "I would like you to come and have dinner with us, Dr. Luciana. It is the least I can do to express our gratitude." Luciana accepted, and that night, surrounded by Nathaniel's family, she felt that, by making that risky decision months ago, her life had changed forever. Luciana's story became an inspiring example, living proof that compassion and courage always find their way, even in the most unlikely places. After that night of family dinner, the relationship between Luciana and Nathaniel took on new colors. He began to admire her not only as the doctor who had saved his father, but as someone who carried a special glow, someone with whom he could share deep conversations and moments of complicity. Their visits to the hospital became more and more frequent, and he always found a way to cross paths with her, even when his father no longer needed her company. Over time, the two began to meet outside the hospital for long walks and impromptu dinners. They talked about everything: medicine, justice, and Luciana's dreams, who now felt more inspired than ever. Nathaniel, in turn, realized that life with Luciana had a new and unexpected meaning. Luciana's story shows us that the true essence of medicine lies not only in technical skills, but in the ability to see the dignity in every human life. In a hospital where appearances and status seemed to be a priority, Luciana decided to act with compassion and justice, even knowing that this could cost her career and the reputation she had built. Her determination to save the injured man, even against her boss's orders, had unexpected consequences, but it paved the way for deeper values to prevail. Luciana's decision was more than a medical action. It was an act of humanity that inspired those around her to reconsider their own attitudes and convictions. Even after being fired, she remained firm, certain that she had done the right thing, showing us that true strength comes from following our principles, regardless of difficulties or criticism. When Nathaniel, the patient's son, discovered Luciana's sacrifice, he recognized that her courage was rare and invaluable. This not only saved his father, but also brought together a family that had already lost hope. Luciana, without expecting anything in return, demonstrated that the value of human life is above any judgment, and that even the simplest gestures can have eternal impacts. In the end, Luciana's story teaches us about the importance of standing up for what is right and maintaining faith in justice, even in adverse situations. May her example be a lifelong example. Inspire us all to never give up on compassion and to always see the value in every person. Because sometimes it is precisely the most difficult, challenging, and unexpected decisions that reveal the depth of our true character and have the power to transform lives forever, leaving a lasting impact.